This mic's not hooked up.
Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Indy Investor Pod. We're just going to continue right along with our conversation. I got Dave Short and Sterling Davis here with me again today, just digging into what they have going on with their businesses. We'll get to that towards the end of the show and what they foresee for 2022, but a lot of good stuff that we're just talking about with CIREIA and what they have to offer and what they can provide for a lot of investors out there. And Sterling and Dave brought up at the end of last show, basically that what we're looking at with CIREIA is it's not just for the novice investor, or it's not just for the experienced investor, or anywhere in between. It's for all of those people. And, Dave brought up the analogy of like, if you go to, it's a good church, if you can go there and that pastor seems like they're speaking to you every single time, and the person beside them feels like they're speaking to them. That's what CIREIA is providing, and what the speakers are really hitting up with all the people that they're talking to at all these events. And I think that's one of the questions that I always get from people when they're asking about CIREIA, or what can they provide, is what is CIREIA for? Is it better for that novice investor, that person that is just trying to figure out, or that person that is doing some deals and things like that? I just say yes, it's for anybody within there. I think one of the things that is great, and you guys mentioned on the last episode too, just a lot of the leaders that are stepping up, and they're leading without knowing they're leading. One of the things that we see within that of that leadership is you have people in this group that are experienced, that are doing some things that they can just provide insights on. There's people in that group that, looking at from the wholesaler standpoint, like, I've burned a lot of money figuring out what works. I can provide the insight on like, hey, here was my experience with this marketing channel. Like, it might not be worth your money putting into it because here's what happened to me. Or there's a lot of other wholesalers when you're talking about, Will and Amy or Ben or anybody like that there's some things that they've burned money in some area that you can learn from. They've made mistakes that you can learn from. Dave just brought it up too with his one-on-one class. He talks about his not his best deal. He's talking about his two worst deals, because that's what you can learn from and things. So, Dave, when you hear that, of people just asking about like, well, is it mostly new or old, or who should come to, who should come to CIREIA? Like, what's your answer to that?
Well, it's geared for everybody. I've been trying to get a lot of my seasoned investor friends to come and take them. We want people to develop the mentality is we want you to come to our group to have a giving attitude.
Yeah.
Even the newbies.
Yeah.
We want them to share with us on what their expertise is. There's a couple newbies that's coming to our group, and I'm picking his brain because he's an analytical guy.
Yeah.
And can assemble names and do other stuff that I don't have I can't do. I don't have the knowledge to do, but it's something I can probably use in my business.
Yeah. Some of the questions that the newer investors are asking are really, that's a lot of some of the great education I feel like that is being brought to CIREIA, is that some of these new investors are asking some great questions in front of everybody, in front of the group, or, in the subgroups too, that really brings a lot of insight.
Well, probably the best, one of the best questions, it's not because I asked it at our meeting with Patrick Grayson last week, is that how much do you front the contractor before he starts?
Yeah.
And, I've always never had an issue doing 10 or 15%. And Patrick was adamant, nothing.
Yeah.
You get some of the work done before you're paid, where you can quickly figure out if you've got the right contractor.
Yep. Pay for the materials needed, and then, don't pay for work.
If that contractor needs 50%, then you're crazy to hire him. Yep. You're absolutely crazy. I mean, the most experienced contractor in our group, Patrick, won't hire him.
Yeah.
On it. So you can ask simple questions that maybe the new investor don't know how important that is to his business, or he doesn't say, doesn't tell the guy that, hey, I can't give you 50% up front.
Yeah.
Proof of funds, if you're a contractor out there, and you're starting $100,000 job, wouldn't you want to know the guy has the money in the bank to pay you? I never thought about asking for proof of funds, from somebody like that. So, both sides of the investment get it. The newbies and the seasons guy pick up stuff at every meeting that they can use.
And then even on the back end of that too, we can teach you how to pick out the fake proof of funds and stuff like that too that's out there now as well
Right.
So some experience with that. So Sterling, what's your kind of insight on that, of like who, who's the right person for CIREIA? Is the newbie
Yeah.
or in there? What's your insight on that?
Yeah. I think one of the things I loved about CIREIA when I first got there was being able to be somewhere that felt comfortable, right? It's all about the community. So inside of a community, you have many different people, you have a diverse community. It's a melting pot of all things. And that's the same thing that we're developing and has been developed at CIREIA, is the ability of community. And what we've learned is community it looks different than what it did 10 years ago, 20 years ago. And those communities are built in different spaces than what they used to be, right? So now community is not necessarily the building in which we meet in, but the community is in the heart of the believers, right? Like if you look at a church, right? Like it's not the building, it's the people. And it's the same thing when it comes to CIREIA and our place. And so it's very important for us to not necessarily say who's the perfect type of person, but who has the willing heart, like Dave said. Like who's the person that's willing to add to the community and not just take from it, right?
Yeah.
So for us, as we kind of work through building a investment community, it's really fun to be able to have a safe place where you can connect with people. Man, I was talking to Dave about 30 days ago, and I was stressed. Business is up and down, and me and Dave are sitting there, and he goes, "Hey, man," he's like, "Why the hell are you holding houses if you tell me you need liquidity?" And I go, "What, Dave?" Like he's like, "You're telling me that you're about to buy another apartment and do this, and you need liquidity. That doesn't make any sense." I was like, "You know what? It doesn't." Oh, he's like, "Why do you do it?" I was like, "Because I'm a buy and hold investor. That's what I know." He's like, "That's stupid." he's like, "Man, you need to turn your money." And then Dave hit me with a flex. He was like, pulls out the pocket. He's like, "Read that. What does that say?" And it was like a $25,000 check. And he's like, "See, that's what I did yesterday." And I was like, "Yeah, all right, I get it, right?"
Yeah.
So I'm not saying that just to say that Dave is rich and I'm poor. I say, I say that to say that it's imperative to be able to have people that can challenge you. And that I was in a vulnerable place, no lie. Like I was in a place where I'm like, man, it's crazy that I have 600 doors and I don't feel like I'm successful inside of what I'm doing, right? Like, and to be able to talk to somebody and say, "You know what are you going to do about it?
Yeah.
Here's some of my suggestions that you should do to be able to build that up." And so, if anything, I would say if you don't come to CIREIA, find a community of people like yourself that can challenge you, that can be a sounding board for your ideas, that can empower your thought to be so great that you will chase them.
Yeah. So I know one of the things you guys are doing too to really kind of speak to everybody from all levels is you have different types of meetings. So you have your main meeting that is basically it's for anybody and everybody. So that's when you have, like we were just talking about with Patrick Grayson coming there and providing some great information, some great education, stuff like that. But you also have the masters meeting that's run by Steve and the CIREIA team, and what they're doing is providing a lot of insights. And then you also have the subgroups that's kind of breaking down a lot of smaller things on certain levels, smaller groups and things like that. Actually, some of those groups are starting to grow too. I think we have like 50 registered for our meetup this month and stuff already. So it's awesome. Cool to see that they're also coming back and growing and things. We were at the point where we were like at 100 and then COVID hit and stuff. But so you guys have the main meeting, you have the masters meeting, you have subgroups, you have just different networking stuff going on and things like that. So you guys give me a rundown of kind of like what people can expect of like what's going on in these meetings, what all can they, where should they plug in, where should they check out, and then when I get into the subgroups too, of like what all types of subgroups are out there for the investors.
Well, my subgroup is dinner and deals with Dave, and we meet the third Thursday of every month, and it's from 6 to 7:30 or 8. And what we do is we track flips that I'm working on. And I typically introduce them to the group when I first buy them. And then every couple months, we update where we're at with that and what's changed, what looks different. And then we also try to bring just having that, and we give the people who attend our group access to this house. So during the week, if they want to go look at it and see something real that they've, has been presented to them, they can do that. But we also bring tips and other avenues, like this coming Thursday, not this Thursday, the third Thursday of this month. We'll be talking about what Sterling's talked about in the past episode is, renting rooms in your house, and how you can, it's really for a novice investor, but they can turn a $250,000 rental instead of a $300 positive cash flow. We can kick that positive cash flow up to $1,600 a month. With very little effort. And we think there's really, Sterling's looking at other cities, which I agree, but, as I've analyzed when he brought this to me, I think it works in certain areas in our town today, Fishers and other locations, that becomes a no-brainer. And this probably doesn't violate HOA requirements like maybe some of the others would do. But it's like, one of our case studies that we did and on a house a couple months ago is I showed people how they could buy a $32,000 house, put $10,000 in it, sell it for $80,000 on a new mortgage, and that $42,000 house yields a 3-year profit of $46,000, and you can't get that anywhere.
I got one. Dave, man, he's the freaking Rain Man, right? So we're sitting in the same, like you talk about $250, right? This is how $250 is worth more than $250, right? In this one conversation I had with Dave, he told me to stop buying and owning and start flipping houses, which is true. And I started flipping some of my houses. I've sold 3 of my houses so far and netted about 100,000 in between that, right? So thanks for that advice. That's more than $250, right? So then we started talking about the co-living space in the model, and he had great insights on how we can roll out that. But the jewel is this. So I had a 4-unit. I go to Dave. I said, hey, I have this 4-unit. I think I can buy it. And he was like, okay, what's the problem? I said, well, it's a friend. He's getting a divorce. He'd do X, Y, and Z. And so I was able to do this deal. This is still the greatest deal. Like, I'm like, what? I can't believe this deal happened. Like, Dave was like, all right, tell him that you will pay, the mortgage. I think the mortgage is like 200,000 or something like that. So we were able to get an investor to pay the 200,000. And then basically we put in a note mortgage. And then each month we had an interest only payment set up right now that's going to pay for the interest only. And then at the end of it, we're selling at 450,000 for the note mortgage. And I called Jared Shore, like, hey, can I buy this on a traditional mortgage? Yeah. He's like, yeah, put 20% down and do all this. I was probably out of like $80,000 to $100,000 doing it my way. Dave just showed me in that way where we're sitting, how I can do a deal, put none of my own money into it. And I'm getting paid basically to do nothing other than set this deal up. Yeah. I was blown away. I was like, so I say that just to like how incredible having people around you that are a little bit smarter than you. Like, I mean, Dave's a lot more smarter than me, but it's just amazing. From one conversation I had with Dave, it probably had net me about $1 million.
Yeah. And I think that's what coming out of this too is, go back to my original question, is like your subgroups and stuff like that. That's where you have a lot of these conversations coming out of like, when you're talking about things like, oh, how can I get creative with this? Or how can I do creative financing or do notes and mortgage? Like there's like Justin Bogart has a subgroup for that. He takes that down and does a great job with that and stuff. We have Elizabeth Sickles, you guys mentioned, one of the best minds in, Airbnb. there is a subgroup for that. You got a burr, a burr subgroup. There's a wholesaling subgroup. Any other, what other subgroups out there? They got the women in real estate.
Yeah.
What other subgroups do you guys have, and what other highlights are out there for that?
Yeah, so we have the landlording, we have the burr, which what we've done is we realized that people want, some of these places with our subgroups, they're able to cross over, right? So like the burr and the landlording actually is teamed up on some weeks.
Nice.
In the months
Nice.
so that you can kind of get best of both worlds, where somebody like Grant Anderson, who is living the best life. Like, I mean, if I didn't have kids, I would probably be somewhere between Grant and Brian Snyder. like those two dudes are living life. So I think, it's amazing to be able to see his journey, coming from Sacramento, coming here, taking his money and putting it in here and burring and being able to grow a great portfolio himself. So he's able to speak to that. And then you have some really good vendors. I mean, I can't speak volume to our vendors. I was telling the people that came to our main meeting the other day is that part of the community is that we vet these vendors, and not that we vet these vendors, but in anything, you vet people by them doing work. So people do bad work, they don't stay in the market just because it pushes them out, right? So our vendors are vetted. You spoke about Patrick Grayson, you talk about property management companies. I'm a property manager myself, but I mean, I was talking to Philip, who works on my team, and I was like, man, I'm not here to speak bad about anybody. I know Joe Atha, he does an amazing job. Like, so when people call and they're like, hey, this happened or this happened, I'm like, nah, that's not a characteristic of that property manager, so that's what happens when you have a community is that, people like Joe and PMI, they do a wonderful job. You have people that I think Home River is one of the largest property management buying companies in the country, right? So those are partners inside of here.
It's like Home River. Home River is a unique company. They're a vendor in our space, and yet people can talk with them and say, what's a hedge fund looking for? I mean, and how can you compete against them? And that kind of thing. Home River, for instance, just signed a deal to build 450 houses in central Indiana. And I said, well, what's that, a 3 or 4 year project? Well, we hope to have them done in 18 months on it. And they're building rental communities. I'm working on a piece of dirt that I think I could basically develop and instantly sell all the lots to them to build a rental community. So even the higher level people have a shot of learning something and getting information. Or, like Sterling said, are hard money lenders. They're trainers. The two I'm familiar with, and I know we have a couple other does a great job, M&M and CPL. And CPL will hold your hand through a deal because they're just ingrained in you being successful. M&M lenders, the same thing. They're ingrained in you being successful in doing your business. So a newbie asks, well, how do I find the money? And I just walk them over and say, here's all the money you'll ever need to do flips. And plus we show people how to do private money lending and stuff. So, but one of the things too, I wanted to hit on just as a self-serving type item, as most people know, I own the Irvington Event Center, which is CIREIA's headquarters also. But I get a lot of people coming to me wanting one-on-one coaching, and I really don't have the time to do it. And I said it would cost too much. It would be in the $300 an hour range if I even had the time to do it. But we tell people, said, look, come in and get a membership in the Irvington co-working space. And every other Monday, I do a 2-hour meeting with these people. I try to bring something for the good of the cause. but we sit there and interact what you're working on. So everybody can get $600 worth of coaching for 2 times a month for $129 membership. And we have a lot of people that's starting to come to our class, and the interaction is, I've finished my stuff and I said, does anybody else have the good of the cause? And one of the gals said, yes, I got a bunch of stuff I need answered. So, we just went over her last flip and the new one that she's going to start and how she's going to do it. We have wholesalers in our group that come to it and bring deals to us, and they buy deals and get information. So it's a group that we hope to make the Irvington Event Center or Irvington co-working space one of the biggest real estate incubators in the city, if not the only real estate incubator in the city.
Yeah. Which is awesome. That's just brings up what you guys have talked about, multiple times. It all comes back to that word of community, and that's what you guys are creating, and that's what you guys have here, in multiple different ways, which is just awesome. So let's talk about Indy specific though. What do you guys foresee as far as the market in Indy in 2022? So, I always get a lot of people this, of course, every people's just like, oh, when is it going to fall? When is it going to drop? I'm like, not this year. Like, it's like, I don't see it. Like, where do you guys stand on that? And what do you guys think about 2022? How's it looking? How's it shaping up? And what can investors maybe expect? Any crystal ball predictions or anything?
Hot takes.
Well, go ahead,
Dave. No, go ahead.
Well, I think in the prime real estate neighborhoods, the Avons, the Fishers, the Carmels, the Westfields, even Lawrence always kind of trailed behind some of these areas, but I don't really think it is anymore. The market's still really, really hot. My bigger one that we did in Carmel, we had 17 showings in 2 days. One of the gals in our office put a 4-bedroom, 2-story with a basement in Westfield. It was in good shape, not great shape. Put it on the market for $420, and went on the market at noon. And by 3 o'clock the next day, it had 70 showings. So there's still she showed a picture of the cars lined up to get into the house.
Yeah.
It's bizarre.
Right.
And I think some of our flips we can see, maybe a little extended time. A couple of examples. We just sold a house in Bates Hendricks, a great house. Bates Hendricks, Windsor Park, some of the other areas like that. The market's still really hot there, but typically you might have 30, 40 days on the market. And the reason that happens is that the millennials typically are not overnight decision makers.
Yep.
And they want to make a decision if there's something else coming on the market that might be better. So they may look at a house first day on the market, but then they'll circle back in 2 weeks and buy it.
Yep.
Because they felt that they've explored the market. And that's what happened with us, and didn't really see any reduction because of time on the market. Time on the market, I think Rebecca Anderson at our last meeting, she gives a synopsis on the real estate market in Indianapolis, which is awesome. Average days on the market, January, 7 days.
Yeah, crazy.
That's average. And the typical in Indianapolis, an inventory would be 4 months of inventory. We have I think it was 0.8 of 1 month in inventory.
Yeah.
On the market. So yeah, it's still really demand. We could get a little pushback if interest rates tick up a little bit. They've already ticked up a little bit.
They will, yeah.
But I also think that they'll do everything in the world to keep them low through the next election. Every time we come on an election cycle, you don't like, because the party that's in charge gets blamed for rising interest rates.
Yeah. So yeah, definitely seeing the demand still higher than the supply. That's why places like, or people like Home River need to go out and they're going to build, just new build rentals, because the demand is still higher than supply and stuff. So Sterling, what do you see for 2022, my man?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I can speak to a different side of it. It is like the rental market, right? So Dave is spoke to the selling and buying market. Inflation is still real, right?
Yep.
So speaking about like Home River, I remember I went to Justin Gooden's meetup of multifamily, and somebody said that we have not caught up with, there hasn't been enough multifamily houses and rental properties built in the last 20 years to meet the demand, right? So with that being said, we see that rents are rising. Rents, I think I read a report somewhere that in the last couple of weeks, they were saying that rents annually are rising 3.6 a year over year. And then you got higher in probably in San Francisco's and things like that. So that is a thing that is good and bad, right? The good, we get higher rents, right?
Right.
And I get caught in these Facebook debates all the time. And my wife's like, "Why do you do it?" Because where are they going to hear the truth if I don't give it to them, right? So
and you can't help yourself, but
and I can't help myself, right? So they were like, "These greedy landlords are raising my rent again." Da, 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 da. And I had to jump on and say, well, it's not that I'm a greedy landlord, but property values has went up. Property values go up, taxes go up. Taxes go up, utilities go up. So now to hedge against all these things, now I'm not saying that like it's equal or pro rata, right? Like, but it is what we deal with as a landlord if taking that risk. So it is going to increase just because of that. And so I think many people don't understand that correlation, and they just assume that this is just free money, and it's not free money. And so I think, and I foresee that we're going to continue to see in metropolitan areas these rents rise in a major way. And that's why I think while we are, color blocks living is going to be a huge thing for these metropolitan areas. I think it works really well in heavy populated metropolitan areas where rents are just skyrocketing, but people want location, right?
Mm-hmm.
So as we look at the market and the investment market, I think what we all know is there's always a play. There's always a play. But I also like with my personal strategy has changed, right? Like I'm one of those people, I'm weary of volatility, and I don't think we get that as much in Indiana. But I do look at real estate at times as a place where I've seen a lot of people burn, and it almost is like the hot potato. And when the music stops, whoever's holding the bag is the person that's going to get screwed with it, right? And so I that's why I think people say all the time, you make your money when you buy it. It's the same thing with investing. Is making sure that you buy it right so that you can yield against some of the influx that you might have in the real estate community.
One of the things too in Sterling's world, if you're in a $2,500 rental, and there are a lot of those out there now, and there's a big demand for them, and you raise the rent $100, which in a 2,500, and that's the 4%, and you raise the rental $100. What the investors that you can sell to investors to get them in this space is that at a 6% cap, that $100 rent increases value of that unit by $20,000. So by just keeping up and if it's a 6% cap, you can plug in any number that you want, then all of a sudden you keep bringing value to the investors on a product that's greatly needed in Indianapolis. Like Sterling said, we're still 5 years behind the cap.
Yep.
And on these things. And Homewood building 400 houses that doesn't even touch it.
Yeah.
So there's just so much demand that's out there. Wages are going up because of inflation. So I mean, that's, from my point of view, that's why it's so important for people to, just as quick as you can, get into a house at these low interest rates, because that's the only way you can beat the market long term.
Yeah. Sterling, I want to ask you too, just why I have you on here as far from coming from the property management side. Are you still seeing any effects from COVID and everything like that when it comes to evictions and tenants and stuff like that going on? Are we like 95% out of it, or what's your opinion on that?
Oh God, we live in a different tomorrow. Like we live in a different day.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to understand what today is. And what I mean by that is in the last 8 months, in the last year, the COVID restriction and guidelines has changed so much. I won't say that we're out of it. What has happened is we've postponed on a federal level. We no longer have the eviction ban. So thank God for everybody that's fought for that. But what's happening on a local level is that judges are kind of fighting their political battles in court. So that's kind of been tough because what's happened in Marion County, Lawrence and Warren in those counties are always been known for certain things, right? So we see it deeper right now, but we can file evictions right now.
Yeah.
But what we've been faced with for the last couple of evictions we filed is they're making everybody apply for Indy rent before we go to the possession hearing.
Yeah.
So with that, it stretches out and it almost makes us look like some of these other states. I mean, Indiana used to be able to get people out in 30 to 40 days in time of eviction, right? So now with having to have people apply for Indy rent, no lie, I have somebody we filed with them on September 2020 is when we filed the eviction on them. We're just getting a possession date this week to be able to kick them out. And the crazy thing is, if we would have filed this eviction in October of 2021, they already would have been out.
Yeah.
So the judge extended it for like 6 months, and then he extended it because he was like, well, let's see if they can apply again. And they got denied. These people have been denied 3 times. And it's sad. I mean, I have a great lawyer, Janelle Berkshire, who fights the good fight for us. And at times, man, she's almost getting in contempt of court just because she's going to battle for you. And it's like,
that was her on our last one.
So. Yeah. Like you want those people on your side,
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I mean, to say that we're out of it, I don't know if we're ever going to be out of it. I think the rules of engagement has changed, and I think we just have to adapt to it.
Yeah. So I got one last question.
Brian, what's your take?
My take is we're taking on anything with tenants right now, except for Lawrence and Warren townships. And those were going to be super just analytical and kind of knowing the situations a little bit more and stuff like that. So we did just get our first eviction in Warren Township. It took 11 months for somebody without a lease. Basically it was, just, somebody like that. So it was a tough situation, but we finally got one through. So that's kind of a good thing. But yeah, so we basically just been operating of like, hey, every township and everything's been pretty good except for Lawrence and Warren are the two that we're kind of looking out for and stuff. And obviously saying all this and Sterling's coming from the standpoint, we don't want to do evictions. It's not something that we ever want to do or have to take on or anything, but sometimes it does come to that. And we always extend or, exhaust all of our options before we get to that point and things. But, sometimes sometimes it's needed. And and honestly, I think it's needed for the person too, for the person that we're evicting. That sounds terrible to say, but it's not a good situation and things could turn out a little bit worse. So yeah, but that's what we're seeing, Dave. So one last question before I get you guys out of here today though. I always like to pick your guys' brains on this of like any particular area or neighborhood that you guys are like, oh man, I'm gonna not that I want you to give up your neighborhood of what you're looking into for your own stuff or anything like that, but for investors, what neighborhood are you kind of keeping your eye on for 2022?
So for me, I'm really interested in the West Side. It's kind of that Speedway-ish neighborhood, like it's Speedway, maybe it's Hallville, maybe it's Indy West, like it's under the bridge of Speedway, but then you have like Alton, you have I think Alton and all those streets over there. I think is really interesting to me. I heard some things about Stringtown actually going to be a go again with the GM stamping plant. So I think that's going to be interested. I don't know if anybody knows that. Like,
we'll see. We'll see if it comes around. So
exactly.
We'll see. But yeah. So Dave, how about you as far as neighborhood you got your eye on this year?
Well, I like some of the older Warren Township neighborhoods, the non-vinyl village type houses. People have been there a long time. So when they sell their house, it's not necessarily about maximum value. It's about the convenience of the move. And as we preach, the best flips is where money's not the issue. It's the convenience of going forward. Yeah. And the other thing that we're looking at, we'd love to find, we would love to find stuff in the $700,000 to $900,000 range. Yeah. That we can give a cosmetic uplift and put back on the market, because those kind of neighborhoods, you can create value, and now you don't have to be afraid that there's not a buyer there.
Yeah. So yeah. Really good input there. So Sterling, I'm going to jump on yours on the west side, but I'm going to go out to 46241 is actually a neighborhood or zip code. I think not Mars Hill. Stay away from the Mars Hill, but when you're looking at like the gardens areas and stuff like that I think you have some. And this is really coming from the buy and hold or the note and mortgage standpoint of where I think it's people have done pretty well in the 46222 and 46221. There's been some flips and there's been some renovations there that I think now that looking at the buy and hold stuff, I think the 46241, I think a little kind of closer below the Speedway area and stuff like that. I think it's going pretty well, and some of our investors having a lot of success over there. We have some pretty solid notes and mortgages over there, so it's an area that I'm kind of keeping my eye on, because I always look at like what neighborhood would I not like last year would I have not said this about, and that's kind of the one that I'm looking at right now. So all right, fellas. Well, thank you so much for your time. Any last little thoughts or anything that we didn't touch today you guys want to put out there or talk about before we jump off?
Well, when we talked about it for 2 episodes, get involved in community.
Yeah.
If you want to get in this space, get engaged.
Yep.
Get engaged.
Yeah, I think today's point for me, it's finding not just the community, but finding people around you that you can have honest conversations with and be vulnerable with, and that is a little smarter than you. So that might be a mentor, that might be a preacher, that might be somebody. But I think it's imperative that we just don't do this alone. We're built to do this together.
Yeah. So great stuff as always, fellows. Really appreciate you. Really appreciate the insights and everything you provided today. So definitely check out CIREIA.club if you want to look into what they have going on, any events coming up, or just if you need to reach out to any of these guys as well, you can contact them or get any information about them through there. And with that, that's a wrap for this episode of the Indy Investor Pod, and we'll see you guys next time. Take care.
Yeah, thanks.